Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, good evening, whenever you're listening to this podcast. It's the second edition of the Sabres Hockey Central Extra podcast, and joining me today, Frank Wolf of From the 300 Level. Hey, buddy, how you doing today?
Very well. Thank you for having me on, Rhino.
Well, thanks for joining us. I mean, it's I had meant to do this podcast a lot more, and then life got in the way, and I had to do a lot of things once the hockey season was over. Because, as I'm sure as you know, Frank, you take time out of your life to do hockey work, and then once hockey work's over, you got to catch back up on all that work you beside.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Now, now, real quick, you can check out From the 300 Level on the internet at www.fromthe300level.com, and you can also follow Frank on Twitter at WOLF3328. Also, just a heads up on the website, 300 is the numbers, not the letters. Now, we're just going to jump in head first, as we always do in the podcast. The NHL entry-level draft is less than 3 weeks away, finally. And as you all should know by now, the Buffalo Sabres hold the second overall pick in this upcoming draft. Now, it's a very important draft, as we all know. I don't think I have to spell that out to you anymore. But since you're the special guest in the podcast today, Frank, I want you to I want to jump into your brain a little. I want to see what you think about the upcoming draft. Just right out of the gate, there's Sam Bennett, there's Aaron Ekblad, there's I almost said Chad for some reason. I'm lost over here. Sam Reinhart. So it's either Bennett, Ekblad, or Reinhart. Who do you think the Buffalo Sabres will draft, and why should the Buffalo Sabres draft that player?
It's interesting. I'm kind of all over the board. Obviously, it all depends on what Florida does. If there's any possible chance that, say, Ekblad falls number 2, and I don't believe he will. I think anyone has read up on him, or if you heard anybody talk about the guy, he's a cornerstone of anyone's organization. These types of defensemen, they don't necessarily come by that often ready to go right out of junior hockey. This kid's ready to go, and he would probably play on any team that drafts him next season. But what does Buffalo truly need? What's going to help them long term?
Well,
that seems to be the fact where we're going. What's going to help this team long term?
Now, the question I have for you, though, is do the Sabres need to – are they at a point where they can say, okay, we need a defenseman, so we're going to draft a defenseman. We need a rough winger, so we're going to draft Bennett, or we need a skilled centerman, so we're going to draft Reinhart? Or are they at the point – do you think they're at the point where they need to just draft the best player available and be happy with that?
I'll tell you this. If it was Darcy Regeer's team, they'd probably draft someone that would help them tomorrow. Being that it's Tim Murray's team now, no, he's not afraid to blow it all up and start over. The one thing Regeer did for the Sabres before he left is stockpile them with talent that might not have been ready to go as quickly as he would have needed to. But we've got our hands on some very, very valuable assets in terms of players. I mean, look at Ristolainen, Zadorov, Grigorenko, Gergensen, this Delorier guy that they brought in at the end of the year. They just signed Allmark, and Baptiste, who knows how good he can be when he gets the call up. So we've got a future. And a year or two ago, we don't know if we had what future we had. And through most of the season, when those kids got sent down and the team was losing night after night, and not just losing, but just getting their ass kicked in every phase of the game. Goals against 25th, even with Ryan Miller. Goals for, they were 30th. Shots on goal, they were 30th in the league on getting shots on goal. Shots against, they were 28th. So if this was Darcy Regeer's team, I think Bennett Reinhart is absolutely the way that the Buffalo would go, with Tim Murray being in charge now. Ekblad, it doesn't matter what they need. This is Murray's team, and he's going to say, you know what, I don't need Tyler Myers. I've never been a fan of his. He hasn't shown up. He's shown up for, what, a year and a half of his 4 or 5 years he's been here. I've seen enough of that kid. I didn't like him when I was in Ottawa, and I don't like him now, and I want him out of my locker room. He may have that opinion. I don't think he does. We're just talking here. So it's going to be interesting. I like of the two players, Baptiste or Reinhardt.
Bennett?
Reinhardt or Bennett.
Yes, okay.
I think Bennett would be the flashier player than Reinhardt. I think Reinhardt's got he's one of those guys that is going to be a cornerstone of your franchise, playing at both ends of the rink. There just isn't a lot of weaknesses to his game. He's got the intensity, he's got the leadership, he can play in both zones. He's a guy that's got a lot of experience international as well. All these guys do that we're talking about here. But I think Reinhardt, for the long term, would be the better pick between the Sams. Bennett, though, I think will bring people out of their seats, much like an Afinogenov did. But I don't know, if he's the guy that's going to be a Buffalo guy, if you will, that blue collar type guy that Reinhardt is. Reinhardt seems to be more of the mold of a Chris Drury type, which is what Buffalo Sabre fans love. Chris Drury is, Pat LaFontaine. Those are the guys that we want, that we fall in love with, and that we buy, 3 or 4 of their jerseys every few years. Those are the guys that we want to see in Buffalo. I remember years ago when the talk was, do you keep Briere or Drury?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were like, well, you got to keep Drury. I mean, he's just total package, and I was leading the charge on that. But the more I stood back and watched this team, I kept noticing that Briere was the one that was finishing. Briere was the one that was scoring. He was the one setting up everyone else. Drury did a lot of the little things, don't get me wrong, and he had a huge goal against the Rangers, we remember. But it was Briere that season that was finishing. And I led the Drury charge probably until about February. But then I started to really take a look at things and said, you know what? For the future of the Sabres, Briere is probably the smarter guy to pick up. Now, obviously, we lost both players. And the reason I want Briere is because we've always had those guys we've had guys like Drury in the past that can lead and can score the odd goal and play at both ends and play physical. But this town seemed to chase away the guys that could finish. We ran Afinogenov out of here. We ran Mogilny out of here to some extent. And those are the guys that you need. You need to have finishers in this league. And you look at the Kings right now. You got to have finishers. And without these guys that can score goals and put the puck in the net, you're not going anywhere.
Well, that's the one thing that always has struck me funny about these upcoming prospects that are shortly going to be NHL players. You look at Sam Bennett, and he seems like a Ted Nolan type of guy, because he'll go down the ice and score a goal. Then his next shift on ice, he'll slam a guy into the glass and not think twice about it. And that's kind of like, that's the one thing to kind of get off track here for a second. Just in general, looking at this team as a whole, I see Ted Nolan, and I know a lot of other people see Ted Nolan as a bridge coach, a guy to keep the team playing somewhat decent. I mean, they're not going to win a lot of games with the current lineup that they're going to put on the ice, but he's going to be that guy that's going to make sure they show up every night and put a complete game together, even if they do lose 3-1 or 4-3 or whatever the score may be. I just hope, for the long-term sake of things, that they don't continue to build a Ted Nolan type of teams or draft Ted Nolan type players, because, like I said, you look at Sam Bennett and you think about it, and just talking about the Sams at this point, comparing both of them, you look at Sam Bennett, and while the grit looks great, he hits, he finishes his checks, all that stuff, but in the long term, you can attest to it, I can attest to it, the one thing the Sabres have lacked, when you talk about guys finishing, they don't have many goal scorers on this team. Sam Reinhart can score goals. That's how I look at it. That's how I've looked at it for months. The Buffalo Sabres can't score goals. Get a guy who can score goals. I mean,
Yeah.
and the craziest part about it is, and I'm not sure, I've been kind of keeping tabs on things. I did see a little while ago that Florida apparently is interested in Sam Bennett, which I'll tell you what, if just saying hypothetically, if Sam Bennett goes first overall and it's either Reinhart or Ekblad at 2, you're going to get a hell of a hockey player no matter what. It's just, do you want to take the best player available, who probably is Aaron Ekblad, or do you want to take a pure goal scorer in Sam Reinhart?
What's the safe play? Between let's say that plays out in your mind. What's the safe pick? Not necessarily the sexy pick, but what's the safe pick?
I think no matter what, and I love it. I do enjoy it. You're a radio man at heart. You're on the podcast as my guest, and you somehow turn it on to me. I enjoy that. I appreciate it. I stick tap to you for that one. But honestly, I think when the day is over, Aaron Ekblad is the safe pick. I could be wrong, but that just seems to me. You read every magazine, you talk to every hockey guy, hockey fans, hockey writers, anybody. They say, Aaron Ekblad's a safe pick.
And they tell you. Sorry, go ahead, bud.
Oh, I was just going to say, he appears to be, even if he doesn't end up being a franchise cornerstone, as people have already anointed him, he's still going to be a very good defenseman. And as we've seen, it's not very to draft a guy and he's the next Shea Weber. It doesn't work like that.
No.
I mean, you can plug and play guys, but at some point in time, you're going to need that Shea Weber, that Ryan Suter, who's going to play 25 or 30 minutes a game and really anchor that defense.
I'll tell you what, years ago at the Odd, I'll never forget the first time I saw Chara up close and personal with the Islanders. Big, tall, lanky defenseman. He could skate. I remember Ray's first shift against him in Buffalo. I don't know if it was his very first shift against him, but the first shift for Ray in that game, he went after Chara with blazing speed to knock him off the puck. Chara barely moved, and for Ray not to be able to get him to budge, Ray was a pretty good body checker. Back in the day, he could throw a check. He hardly moved. I knew right then and there that this was a different type of defenseman. He could take on a 6'2", I think Ray was 6'1", 6'2", 220, 230, just a hulking figure. He could take a check from this guy who came in from pretty much the blue line. Chara was even with the net, if you will. Had the puck. Ray went in with everything he had and hardly budged him. A couple of shifts later, Pekka comes in. Now, you remember what a body checker he was.
Yeah.
And he must have recognized Ray's mistake, Ray's flaw. Ray went to hit him high. Pekka comes in, and he goes real low, and Chara does this tumble over, which was pretty neat. That was the first time I ever seen Chara, but I watched him closely that game. Those two plays stick out in my mind. But what impressed me about Chara then was he didn't let that fluster him. He wasn't worried about how tough Rob Ray was then. He was taking that hit head on, and he saw Pekka come in, and Pekka had his rap. People knew he could throw a check. He got up, continued to play his game. He didn't get crazy. He didn't let those two incidents get to him. He seemed like a real mature player at that time. He was a little slow. Obviously, the NHL game was a lot faster than what he was used to, but he was headstrong then. It takes years for these defensemen to truly come into their own. I guess they say 4 or 5 years. And Chara went from the Islanders, and then was it Ottawa, and then Boston, maybe. But not until he really got to Ottawa did I really see Chara's game come full circle.
Well, and that's I'm sorry. Keep going.
What I'm saying is, we got Tyler Myers back there, who's almost the same size as Chara. I'm sorry, is it his 5th year with us now? Going into his 5th full year? Would it be for Myers? It's got to be his 5th or 6th, but obviously he had the the lockout year and then the half a lockout year. So maybe Myers is starting to come into his own, and it definitely helped having another coach in his ear. You had Ruff and James Patrick in his ear, and now you got Nolan and whoever Nolan had on his staff, which are all gone now, I guess. But it helped Myers relax a little bit, and I think Myers had a much better year last year than he had years before. Since
Myers has played with the Sabres for 5 years, so this year will be his 6th. But remember that he is only 24 years old, so that's the one thing that I've wondered about Tyler Myers. You see Zdeno Chara and how he was traded, and you go, how the hell do you trade a guy like that? But then you go back and look and see it took him a while to develop. So like you said, the point you bring up, how while Myers had lofty expectations following his Rookie of the Year season, it almost seems unfair to sit here and expect him to be a number one shutdown defenseman solely because he's still filling out and becoming an NHL player.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not as if he's a centerman who's going to come into the league at 18 years old and score 100 points, and you're like, okay, that's what he is. I mean, he came in, he had a great Rookie of the Year season, and then instantly everyone expected him. And I'm not going to leave myself out of that. Even I expected him to be something great. But the problem is that it almost seems like I don't know, maybe you can help with this one. Maybe it seems as if, just like I said, too many expectations were put on the guy. So now, even though he's been in the league for coming on his 6th season, he's only 24 years old. He'll be 25 in February. People are expecting the world out of the kid, and he's still just that, a kid.
And when he came to Buffalo, his rookie year, you're playing in a line with Henrik Telander, who's at that point was pretty much at the top of his game. You had Tony Ludman, who was still a very good defenseman. Jay McKee was there. You had some very sound defensive players around you. He hasn't had that in a few years.
I mean,
you had Craig Rivet, but he was at the tail end, and Myers very young, out and about, not taking maybe his workouts as serious as you need. A young kid. Now he's 24, going on 25. You bring Telander back to smack the kid around and say, hey, get with the program here, man. Last year, I don't know what you were doing, but while I was busting my ass to get ready for a season that may or may not happen, you were out partying, gallivanting, you come into camp overweight, and you had a terrible season. This, after having 2 lackluster years in a row. So where's your head at? Get your head out of your butt, hit that gym, focus on how you got this far and what you're going to do to stay around, because you're going to end up like so many other defensemen we've seen that came in to the league that are no longer around. The Kyle McLarens, those guys are gone. I mean, he had a great rep his rookie year. He had a great season in Boston. Then kind of went to crap, and they ship him off to San Jose or wherever they sent him off to, and now he's out of the league. And he was out of the league 2-3 years after that. So Myers, what did he do? Before this season, he hired some trainer to go out to BC and work out with him every day, and kind of turned him around. And now he had a decent year last year.
Again, it's too high of expectations, because I mean he was towards the end of the season, he was playing some good hockey before he got hurt. He was playing some good hockey, but you look at the big
plays.
Yeah, you look at the big picture and you go, well, he's not number one defenseman good. And I think a lot of, especially with the direction of where this franchise is headed right now, it's more or less to me at least. And like I said, you can certainly add on in a second. I almost think, if anything, the next season or two, lower your expectations a little. Just sit back and enjoy the ride and see what happens, because you get a better coaching staff. I mean, we've all seen it. Not all of the Sabres struggles can be attributed to it, because there's been some bad players doing some bad things throughout the past couple seasons. But at some point in time, you have to look at the coaching staff and say, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, this kid has a bucket load of talent, and what are you doing with them? Nothing. Like, you're just not doing anything with them, and you're struggling because of it. And then when the coaches say, well, the players aren't doing their job, it's really, you look at the coaching staff again. I mean, that's why you look at Ron Rolston, while he was in over his head, it's just at some point in time, the coaching staff just needs to take the blame, bite the bullet, and say, we screwed up. So that's why, I mean, we've heard nothing about assistant coaches right now, but I hope they bring someone in, especially with all these young defensemen coming into the league. And like you had mentioned before, it takes young defensemen some time to acclimate and really grow into their potential in the NHL, unless they are a superstar defenseman, a superstar prospect or something like that. But bring a guy in who can really mold these kids into something quick so they can get on their feet and go.
Would you say the Bruins have a good, solid defensive core?
That certainly appears to be the case on paper.
Yes. And I believe they have a former Sabre out there. Wasn't a great defenseman during his playing days. I'm trying to think of his name. Former Sabre defenseman, was a fighter, one of those tougher defensemen. Probably lost more fights than he was in. But one of the assistant coaches for the Bruins is a former player. Alf Samuelson with the Rangers, former defensive player. You just like you said, you got to bring in someone that these players can relate to get them ready for the game. And that's why I say this Ekblad kid, if for some possible way he falls to number 2, it's not a bad pick. It's a very safe pick. Of course, it's not a bad pick. It's a great pick. But you got the Ristolainen, the Zadoras, Tyler Myers, as we've mentioned. You got some young defensemen, even Roedel. Is it Comfer? Or Comfer's not a defenseman. Who's the other defenseman I'm thinking of? They brought up at the end of the year that played in the World Championships.
Ristolainen. Ristolainen was the one in the World Championships.
Well,
I was looking that assistant coach up for you.
You'll find him.
It's Doug. I'm probably going to pronounce his last name wrong, but it's Doug Huda.
Yeah, Doug Huda. Yep.
Okay, I got it right. Good. Yeah, that's a guy.
There's a good fight between him and Rob Ray in Hartford.
I'm sure that's got to be a good one. That's the cool thing about talking to you about hockey too, is that because we're from. I'm not saying you're old. Don't get me wrong over here, but we come from two different eras of hockey. You remember hockey in the 80s and 90s, and I started watching hockey in like 2001, 2002, 2003. Those are my hockey memories. So it's interesting. It's always fun.
Yeah, who's the kid they brought in from Boston? Was it Boston College or Michigan? The defenseman they brought up late in the year.
McCabe.
McCabe.
I don't know why it took me. I'll tell you what. Just a quick sidebar, like we talked about for the podcast. My hockey brain has been off for a good couple months now. So, you come into.
Well, we haven't done an old time hockey show from the 300 level for over a month. So, I mean, I haven't really talked hockey. All I've done was, other than the Delorier signing and Baptiste signing, I haven't really focused on what the Sabres have been doing. I've been watching the Stanley Cup, and it's just been amazing. Every game I've watched has been awesome.
It's fun to dream, It's fun to think we'll be there someday.
We will be there someday.
Don't know when someday is, but that someday will be nice.
Do you think we'll be invited to cover any of these upcoming playoff games we're dreaming about? Any chance in the world?
I hope so. I think if anything, just again a quick sidebar. I think if anything, what happens is just like normal games, where if there's a big media contingent, we might get it. But if not, then we obviously know why, because it's the playoffs. I mean,
yeah.
Usually, I believe it works as if start of the playoffs you'll get credentials, but if it's like the Stanley Cup, no way.
Yeah.
Because the more people that show up, the less seats there are, and then.
Oh, sure.
It's all about supply and demand over there, but thankfully we're even lucky enough to get credentialed. I mean, that right there is good enough for me.
Crazy, just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, you're telling me.
So I like Bennett, I like Reinhard, and I like Ekblad. I really like Ekblad. I just get goosebumps when I see 2, maybe 3 years down the road when you've got Zadorev, Ristolainen, Myers, and then Ekblad. Those 4 guys.
All right, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm going to cut you off and put you on the spot right now. 2 questions. First off, you're making the pick right now. Who is it? No explanation, just who is the pick?
Ekblad.
Okay. Second, if you draft Ekblad, do you take one of your defensive prospects, one of your touted defensive prospects, and potentially flip them for a goal scorer? I feel like that dead air is you thinking.
I don't think there's any way you move Ristolainen or Zadorov.
No. Ristolainen and Zadorov, in my opinion, they're untouchable because
exactly
they've got a boatload of talent.
Myers, yeah, I would.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Give me a little bit more than Bennett or Reinhardt for Myers, but yeah, I'm entertaining that.
Here's a fun little sidebar, because as you've noticed on this podcast, I don't run a very tight ship. So if you want to talk about like hockey and then you want to mention how you like Yo Gabba Gabba, I mean, if you want to make a good point, I'll talk about it all day, man.
How the Red Sox can't seem to put a winning streak together
anymore? We're not talking about that. That's something that's not allowed in these woods, okay?
Hey, I feel your pain, man. I feel your pain. I'm in my studio right now, and all I look at are pictures of Fenway Park and the glory years, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on with that team. But yeah, let's keep it to hockey. Why suffer anymore?
I look at I see the Red Sox doing bad. I look at last year. I'm happy. It's kind of I'm still in a championship hangover over here. Okay.
Hey, as far as anyone's concerned, the Boston Red Sox right now are the World Series champions.
They're the defending champions.
October, they are the World Series champions.
Correct, sir. Now back to hockey. On this hockey podcast, let's talk about hockey.
We'll try.
The one interesting thing that's been popping up all off season, because obviously on Twitter, you and I both follow a large contingent of Sabre fans because the conversations are fun. They're interesting. They're great. The one name I always see pop up, and it's just hypotheticals, is Christian Ehrhoff. So if you draft an Aaron Ekblad, while he may not play in Buffalo this year, you've got guys in Rochester who can move up and fill the hole that Ehrhoff would make. Now, do you attempt to trade a guy like Christian Ehrhoff solely because, as we saw at the last trade deadline, his cap hit is so small, and he's a pretty good defenseman. I mean, last year, it seems like they put a lot more pressure on him, and it wasn't as good as years before. But that being said, he's still a pretty good defenseman who I'm sure a Stanley Cup contending team would not mind adding him. Would you trade Christian Ehrhoff if you drafted Aaron Ekblad? Or not even just Christian Ehrhoff, but would you trade the untouchable kids? Would you try to package somebody for a young goal scorer, as I mentioned before?
Sure. Absolutely. Again, when you finish with, giving up the most shots on goal per game, when you're, goals against average ranks 25th in the league, anybody on that defensive side of the ice is tradable. Now, it's interesting what you say about Ehrhoff, because I think I agree with you. I think he's not a number one, and probably not even a number two defenseman on a lot of teams. I would say 15 to 16 teams out there would not have him in the top two spots. Is he a solid number 3, solid number 4? Absolutely. Is he a solid player at the point on a power play? Yeah, I think I'd like to see him on more power plays if he has a little more room to guys to work with. I think he'd be phenomenal.
I think I think we learned last season more than anything that Christian Ehrhoff, like I said, great defenseman. A lot of teams would love to have him. He's seems like a complimentary player where if you have a good player with him, he'll be great. If you don't, you get what you get. I
agree with you. If you're expecting this guy to be your number one defenseman with a guy like, I don't know, McBain, you're in a lot of trouble. So
anybody on the defense at this point, if you're pairing him up with Christian Ehrhoff, he's probably in trouble. I mean, let's just be honest.
I agree with you. Kind
of like how people were saying that Tyler Myers was terrible at playing defense, but then you saw who was on the other side of the ice, and it was Mike Weber, and you go, well, how much is this bad hockey attributed to the fact that he's playing with Weber or the fact that he's a bad hockey player?
Exactly.
And that's what makes this whole process tough.
A tough process. I think on the blue line, I would be very surprised. And I know Weber does get does take a lot of abuse. And I'm not one of Weber's biggest fans, but I think when you look at the team, the entire body of work, and who you put any of these defensemen with, there isn't one defenseman on this team that's a top two defenseman on any other of the top teams. Like even Myers in Boston isn't on that number one line. Myers in St. Louis isn't on that one. He's not playing with Bouwmeester. You know what I mean? He's not a top defenseman on a lot of teams. So you don't have that clear number one defenseman. Now, if you were to put Myers with a guy like Chara, he may play a lot better. If you put him with a Bouwmeester, he might be a lot better. But Myers with like a McBain or an Ehrhoff or a Weber, he's just not good enough, and he's not as dependable. And maybe that's a little bit of age, experience. But at this point in time, he's not a number one defenseman. He's not unless he's on a team like Buffalo or Calgary, then he's going to stand out.
We're talking a lot about the defense, and I'll continue this for a few more minutes, no problem. You think about it, and Weber will probably be back. He'll be back next season. That's not a problem. He's under contract. He'll be here. McBain, I'm sure they'll sign him to some sort of tender. He'll be back. But I think depending on, because here's the interesting thing. Guys were put in a very bad spot last season because they came into the season under Ron Rolston, and then shake up. It's Ted Nolan's team now. And it'll be interesting to see how Ted Nolan handles the players, who he decides who will play with who plays where, who does what. Because while he was able to do it during the season last year, he didn't have the amount of time he's going to have this offseason and training camp, all that stuff, to see who does what good and who he likes where. I mean, that's really the long and the short of it. But, I mean, I think, if anything, this year's a pretty big season for Mike Weber. It's a pretty big season for Jamie McBain. Because all the guys you've mentioned previously in Rochester, all the defensive prospects who are really on the fringe of being an everyday NHL player, if Aristolainen comes up, Weber or McBain's going to lose their job. If Zadorov comes up, one of those guys is going to lose their job. So I think next year Weber's still going to be a contributor on the defensive side of things. I'm not saying it's going to be good, not saying it's going to be bad. But I think after next season, McBain might not be in Buffalo. He might be traded somewhere else. Weber might not be playing 15 minutes a game like he was last season or something like that. I mean, it's going to be. Here's the thing: we're in the doldrums right now. We're in the basement. Things are terrible. It's dark. It smells bad. We don't like it. But things are going to get better quick. At least not if not defensively, offensively as well, because there's a lot of young offensive talent in Rochester. If they can finally figure Grigorenko out and unscrew that situation, because we all know Darcy Regier jumped the gun way too fast on that one and really screwed the kid up, because when you're a teenager, or it's going to be very hard to, or however old he is. I know he's young, so don't kill me if I said he's a teenager and he's not. He's a young kid. He had like 5 or 6 different coaches in one season. That's probably not going to help him. Which is why finally being in Rochester for a full season, Mikhail Grigorenko, I almost am certain, will blossom. You put him under a guy. You put him under a guy. You say, "This is what we want you to do. Do this," and then you do that right. We'll up it more. Keep getting better. Keep getting better. Keep getting better. I mean, that's how I see things.
My most embarrassing moment last year.
I remember this, but keep going, please.
Funniest moment. It wasn't when I stepped on the emblem my first time in the locker room. Actually, I didn't step on the emblem. I was about to, and someone, thankfully, at the very last second, I
was talking to you, and then like your eyes were the size of saucers, because this guy was going to shoulder check you out of the way. Like, I don't care if you get hurt, don't step on that logo.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a more embarrassing moment.
Okay.
Just before Grigorenko got sent down to Rochester, here's this guy with total puppy dog eyes, right? And the media is just hoarding all around him. This is after like a practice. And I called him Zemgus. And he looks at me, he goes, "You just call me Zemgus?" And I say, "Oh, shit. I'm sorry, man. I'm going to send you your favorite bottle of vodka." I don't even know if he's 21 yet. So I will send you your best bottle of vodka for that. I apologize, sir. I think I called him sir. I'm like 20 years older than him. I
That's the
called him
best.
sir. He goes, no, it's cool. But here's Girgensons, right, having a hell of a rookie season. And here's Grigorenko came into the league.
You're getting confused now already. Just tell the
Yeah,
story.
exactly. Oh, I'm always confused. But Grigorenko, they come into the NHL at the same age. You know, they drafted together and whatnot. And here's Girgensons, just the apple of the city, if you will. Is that a phrase? I don't know. He's the media darling.
Apple of their eye.
Yeah, the apple of the eye. Everyone loves him. You know, this guy might be a captain down the road and everything. And
You know what's great?
Grigorenko. What?
You know what's great about Girgensons is that it's the expectation.
Yeah.
We expected, and this is one of those crazy sidebars we're going to have throughout this process today. Grigorenko was expected to be 100 points in his first season or 100 points soon. You know, like just outrageous. I'm not sure anybody ever said he'd have 100 points in his first season.
Is that his name?
Yeah, but is he good?
He's supposed to be as good as, Semin, immediately. Backstrom, immediately. That's who people saw.
Yeah.
He's just not ready for that.
Yeah, and then you get Girgensons, who he plays Buffalo hockey. He plays Buffalo hockey.
And everybody shape.
But then you look at the end of the season, Girgensons. I mean, I'll tell you what, I love Girgensons, the player he is, what he does. He's awesome. It's going to be great to watch him for the next 15, 20 years. But on the stat sheet, he didn't score a lot. But Buffalo loved him because they expected him to be this hard-nosed player who gives it 110% every time he's on the ice, which he did. The city loves him. And then Grigorenko, they want him to score a bajillion goals and win everything and do everything now, and he doesn't because they've screwed him up. So everyone's like, well, this kid's a bust. Get him out of the city. And that's ridiculous.
I know. We are terrible.
There's a credit. If people listening don't understand Buffalo hockey, that is a microcosm of what Buffalo hockey is. A guy who scores, less than not many points in a season. A great player, great media guy, great with the fans, everything, does everything right, answers, everything correctly, all that stuff. They love him. But the guy who could potentially score a ton of goals and be a great offensive player isn't great out of the gate. Everybody wants him gone. I don't understand it, but that's Buffalo hockey for you.
You know what? I think this is what I attribute this to. That mentality, because you're 100% right.
Is it the Buffalo News?
It's not necessarily. This guy on WGR was hired. You probably remember his name, Coach Chuck Dickerson. You remember that guy at all?
No. It must be before my time.
Well, they brought him to GR after the Art Wanderers were gone. Bob Gaughan was there on the They bring in Chuck Dickerson, who was a former defensive coordinator of the Bills. Marv Levy, Wade Phillips was the head coach at the time, and Coach Dickerson came in, and he just kind of was a total jackass, if you ask me. If there was someone doing something wrong, this guy put him under a microscope, and he was like his whipping boy all year. They did it to an offensive lineman named Glenn Parker, who probably wasn't as mobile as some other offensive linemen that Dickerson loved, and they ran this guy out of town. Next thing you know, he's playing the Super Bowl with the Giants.
That's what we do. That's what we do in Buffalo,
That's what we do. So Dickerson comes in. He knows nothing about hockey, and I'll tell you what, Ryan, this guy went off on Dominik Hasek day after day. He wins 6 Vezina trophies. And this guy is this guy's a loser. He's a jerk. He's a bum. And he would get fans riled up.
This is why I don't.
Way.
That's a good example of why I don't read the Buffalo News. I don't listen to Buffalo radio unless it's something important that I need to listen to, that I need to be educating myself on. Because you get these people you get the media members, and this is a whole conversation for a different day, but I'm just going to hit it quick. You get media members who essentially act entitled, like, my viewpoint is so important that you need to listen to it no matter what it is. And there has been some, excuse my language, some dumb shit that has been said over the past 4 or 5 years that I've paid attention to, where you just smash your head against your computer desk because you say, how do these people get paid to put this crap out there? Because it's just ridiculous. But if it gets the people going, I guess then it worked.
Sells papers, and if it gets people listening to the radio, so that, like I said, I remember the day Hashik.
Then guess what we're doing?
Word passion.
Yes.
But I remember the day, because I used to call into this guy's show and get him riled up. He hated me, because I would call and he would just go berserk. But I love getting under this guy's skin. So he's having this show. He's at Bert's Bike Shop on Delaware Avenue, which is no longer there, so, Bert's is blown up. But anyways, he's at Bert's Bike Shop on Delaware Avenue, and I'm in my car, and he's saying, I'm over here, come and see me, blah, blah, blah. And so anyways, he's on the radio, and just that day, Hashik wins either his 6th or 7th Vezina. I don't know what. Maybe it was his 6th. If he's only won 6, it was his 6th. But he's talking about anything but Hashik winning this award. He's a Buffalo Sabre. He just won the best goaltender, and he's going on for hours. His show's going on. He isn't even mentioning this. So I call up, and I'm like literally right in front of Bert's Bikes, and I go to him, and my opening line was this. I go, "Hey, Dummerson, you're going to talk about anything but Hashik's 6th Vezina, huh, fat ass?" Just like that, because he was a big guy. And I loved embarrassing this guy in front of people. And it got on the air, the whole thing. And he goes, "Frank, get your ass down to Bert's Bike and Shop so I can knock my..." He goes, "I want to stick my hand right through the back of your head." So I went in there like an idiot. "Here I am, Chuck. You going to talk about Hashik or not?" And they had to get me out of there. They had to get me out of there. And I was just a young punk at the time.
So I guess those were your dark days.
So I haven't really called the radio much since then. But I used to call it, because I was even younger than you are at this. When you first started, I was a young kid, and it was great. Back then, talk radio was a cool thing. Now it's like overblown with just garbage.
Well, hey, there are some good guys there. I mean, I got a few friends.
Cool guys, yeah.
There's some very smart, good guys over at WGR that I do enjoy talking to, listening to. But for the most part, no. It's just avoid it because no need to have an unnecessary headache because somebody doesn't like the way Mikhail Grigorenko takes faceoffs or something. Something stupid like that.
Exactly.
But I was going to say, we could be trendsetters and we can start hating on Zemgus Girgensons now. So in 5 or 10 years, we can say, well, you guys are Zemgus Girgensson hater hipsters because we did it first years ago. Just listen to the podcast.
There you go.
But anyways, I want to hit this before we wrap up. Sabres have only a few unrestricted free agents. And I had actually quite a little bit of restricted free agents, but real quick, Zenon Konopka, does he stay or does he go?
Absolutely not.
I figured before the suspension maybe he would stay, but now he's missing a quarter of the season because of a suspension. I don't see how he can be here.
That's my only reason why.
Maybe a team that's a playoff contender that can say, "Hey, we'll sign you to a minor league deal or something to get you in the system, and then when you're ready to play, we can call you up and we'll put you on our fourth line." But I mean, they can win faceoffs fantastically. But besides that, I mean, it kind of is what it is. Henrik Tallinder, does he stay or does he go?
I'm not so sure. He doesn't call it a career. He had a couple injuries. He had a bunch of injuries last year that were just minor injuries, but just were taking his toll on the guy. And with the guys we have coming back in terms of guys down in Rochester, I don't know so much that he comes back as a player. I would not be surprised if he comes back to some kind of players coach's role, because he seemed to get along pretty well with Teddy. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back but gets moved into a player's coach's role type thing where he's behind the bench like James Patrick did. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think his days in Buffalo are done just because of the kids. I mean, you don't want to rush kids to the NHL, but then again, you don't want to block them.
True.
I think he's done in Buffalo. Maybe he'll catch on somewhere else where he can be a low leverage situation guy or whatever. But I don't think he comes back to Buffalo. Now for the other,
if he comes back, I thought he might retire with all those.
Well, hey, like you said,
he had first of the year.
like you said, he could come back and they could have him work as a developmental coach or something, or work in the system. But I don't think it makes sense for the Buffalo Sabres right now moving forward to have Henrik Tallinder on the ice.
Use the money somewhere else.
Exactly. Speaking of somewhere else, good transition. I'm really good at this radio game. If you can't tell, my bedroom should be filled with awards right now. And
this
yes,
is not your first rodeo, man. You sound like you've been doing this a while.
Thank you. Yes, I am recording this podcast in my bedroom, but hey, everyone, back off. I'm moving out. 22. I'm a young man. I'm growing up, okay? Back to the hockey talk. Alexander Salzer, the only other unrestricted free agent for the Buffalo Sabres. Obviously, there are unrestricted free agents in Rochester, but we're not worried about that right now. Alexander Salzer, he did. I was just gonna mention that. Yeah, Alexander Salzer signed overseas 5-year deal. He's not coming back, obviously, because he has contractual obligations. Corey Conacher, I think that's a solid yes. He'll probably get a couple more chances here to prove that he can play well. The Ennis is going to get, and I'm just going to run down a few because obviously yes, but I want to ask you a few good questions here. Ennis obviously is going to get a pay raise. Foligno, same thing. He'll be here. Jamie McBain, most likely yes. Obviously Chad Ruedel, he's gonna be signed. The couple names I have here. First off, Connor Knapp. Do you think, with the depth and goaltending that Buffalo Sabres have coming up, do you think they re-sign Knapp and put him in Rochester or put him in the ECHL, or do you think they just let him go?
Didn't get a solid look at him. So it would not surprise me if they just let him go.
Well, I was going to say, because here's the thing, too. While he played in Buffalo, there were a boatload of injuries. He did start the season in the ECHL. And with a team that has a solid goaltending depth, I mean, at some point in time, you got to say, hey, man, it's just not working out. But, I mean, speaking of goaltenders, Matt Hackett, he's a restricted free agent. What happens with him?
I think he does get another shot to come back. I would like to see the Sabres in the offseason sign a veteran goaltender who's been around, plug in there. I don't know if Tim Thomas is available. I'm talking because my thing is I don't think they're any better than a 25th, 26th place team next year, no matter what they do at the draft.
Okay.
And with free agent signings, I don't think they're any better than a 25th, 26th place team next year. So what I like to see is just bring in a veteran goaltender that can work with the Hackett or this Knapp kid, or even that Allmark guy who's probably going to be in Rochester.
Well, I think Allmark is going to finish next season overseas because he's got one more year left on his contract there. Then he said he would come over, but the thing that I'm sorry to cut you off, but you bring a very good thought to my brain. You're talking about getting a veteran goaltender. Is that you saying that you don't believe that Enroth or Neuwirth can take over the goaltending job, or do you think that just because one of them is unreliable, that you think they need a plan B, if you will?
I like Jonas Enroth. I don't think for a second he's a number one goaltender.
And you think he can be
on a Stanley Cup competing team? I don't see Jonas Enroth as being a guy that you can count on to make the big save over and over and over again, especially throughout a 7-game playoff series. I don't think he's the guy for you.
Remind me the next time I see you to smack you in the back of the head. I'm telling you, lower your expectations, damn it. And you're talking about the Stanley Cup, and the Sabres can't even get out of last place.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If I know a guy is not, if I have the feeling that a guy is not the guy that's going to bring us that can win a Stanley Cup playoff series, I'm talking first round, second round. If I don't think he can do it, then I don't want to waste any more time on him. and that's my opinion of Enroth. If he's going to be your backup goaltender, I'm all for it. I think he'd be a great backup goaltender. I don't see him capable of winning a playoff series or stealing you a playoff game like like Brian Miller has done for us in the past.
So then what are your thoughts about Neuwirth?
I don't think that guy's ever had a solid look. So he needs a solid look. Enroth signed, right? You can't dump Enroth.
No, Enroth is going to be here. I mean, here's the thing. I almost think it's Neuwirth's job to lose because he showed in Washington he could be a pretty damn good goaltender. But then you have to remember, it was Washington. Part A, it was Washington. They're a pretty good hockey team. Part 2,
they scored 4 goals a game.
Well, yeah. Part 2, he can't stay healthy. That's been if there's one knock on Michael Neuwirth throughout his entire career, it's been he cannot stay healthy. Now, when you talk about Jonas Enroth possibly being as you say a fringe NHL number 1, or at least that's how I see it from your describing. I think he could be the guy for a couple years, but it just seems as if you need to build. And here's the thing: Jonas Enroth could be crappy next year, but once the defense gets better and the offense gets better, you could make a guy look good enough. And it's
with a good defense. You're saying?
Yeah, with a better defense and a better offense, you could make a guy look good enough. And I almost think that's, because Enroth has not played enough, I don't think, to kind of really see what he can do, which is why I'm so intrigued by next season, because it's, can Neuwirth stay healthy, and can Enroth take the job? Because I almost think that's what to me at least, and I'm just one hockey fan over here, I think that's it's really it's Enroth's job to lose. But that being said, they won't hesitate to give it to Neuwirth at the drop of a dime, because you've got 2 NHL goaltenders. Both these guys belong in the league, whether it's a number 1 or a number 2. They belong here. But who wants it more? That's what it's going to end up being. And if it is Enroth, hey, I can't complain. If it's Neuwirth, I can't complain either. We're playing the hand that we were dealt at this point. And unless they pull, I don't see the Sabres drafting, a goaltender high. I don't see them signing a big free agent. I don't see them making a blockbuster trade for a guy. Maybe 5 or 6 years down the road when they feel they're on the fringe and maybe we need to upgrade there. But I think for now it's going to be those 2 guys, and you love it or you hate it. You're going to get 2 guys with their backs up against the wall. See what you can do.
I agree with you. I don't think Enroth's any better than what we had when we had Marty Baron here. When we lost, when Hasek left, who we had, Baron and a couple other guys, and Miller. I don't think he's any better than Baron. And Baron is a good goaltender, but he's not capable. And I hope Enroth can prove me wrong. That'd be great. I'm not rooting against them. I don't root against any of these guys. It's just my personal feeling. Body language is a lot. After games, he was a sourpuss. Too often, it seemed like.
Well, yeah. Don't forget, he was the guy last season who said to us, "How am I supposed to win with this team?"
There you go.
And that was kind of like, what? Really? Did you just say that? I understand you get frustrated and pissed off because you're playing behind one of the worst teams in hockey, the worst Sabres team in franchise, the lowest scoring offense in the history of hockey since 1967. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. But what message does that send to the kids in the locker room when you're saying you can't win with this team? You're calling everybody out. That's just that.
There you go. And that's one of the things that I go back to is that moment in the locker room when he said that. And it's, this is not a great defensive core, but these guys are still putting their bodies in front of a lot of shots for you. They're throwing 35, 40 shots a game at you, and 15 to 20 are bouncing off of players left and right here. So they're taking a lot of bullets for you, and for you to say that's so difficult for anybody in that locker room to swallow. I don't think no one's a big fan of Enroth's game. he made some comments after a few losses, and there's a number of losses where he thought maybe the goaltending was a little suspect at times. If they got their hearts set on finishing next year the way this past season ended, and Ross your guy. And Ross your guy, Neuvert as a backup, and vice versa. And forget about bringing in a veteran goaltender. But
hey, and while you say that you say it might not be a guy that steals you a series or wins the cup. I mean, even during this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I really would wish they had better options. But then you think about it, these two guys right now are really fighting for their life, and that's what you want. I mean, it might not be the best situation in the long term, but right now you're going to really find out who can just suck it up and play better.
Yeah, and like you were saying, this team, I don't see them finishing any better than 25th at the most next season. So,
and that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. No, not at all. Not at all. It's
because there's two
shot at a couple of solid, franchise-changing players.
There's a Connor McDavid and a Jack Eichel that make losing next season so much better.
Yes, it does.
The last question, the last restricted free agent I wanted to ask you about was Luke Adam. Now, just to preface real quick, he has shown he can score in the minor leagues, but then he comes up to Buffalo and just doesn't have it. Is he a guy you see in the Sabres' long-term plans, or is it kind of just play it by ear now and see what happens?
Do you know who I think of when you say Luke Adam? Immediately?
Who?
Is Grigorenko. I think this guy has had so many coaches, so many people in his ear, and I think there's some, I don't want to say family squabbling with the Adam, but there's definitely something on the outside that's not agreeing with the player on the ice. He's got a lot of off-ice issues. It seems that he deals with a lot of off-ice issues. I don't know you're closer to Rochester than I am, so I don't know if you pick up that vibe on him. That's a guy who is in desperate need of a change of scenery.
I've always thought that he was a prime candidate for a change of scenery. He might not be a 20-goal scorer, but he could be maybe a productive third line guy. Maybe a two if he.
Who's
if
that
he
guy
can
we
pick
had
it
in
up.
Rochester? Mancari, that kept on coming up and never really got his due.
He's your baseball version of a he's a baseball version of a 4A player, where he can play great in the minors, he can be okay in the majors. Like there's a guy, look him up if you want to. He was a Pawtucket Red Sox forever. His name is Jeff Bailey. He was great in the minor leagues. This guy could play and hit 20 home runs in a season, blah, 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 blah. Comes up to Boston, doesn't do anything. Ends up being one of your prototypical 4A players. Too good for the minor leagues, not good enough for the major leagues. That's Mark Mancari. He's a great guy, great player, great person, all that stuff, but that's just sometimes how the ball, how it lies or whatever. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think of Luke Adam. Like Grigorenko, he's got a lot of coaches in his ear, a lot of outside interference, and his minor league game, he is rock solid. He does put a lot of pucks on that.
Well, last year he scored over 20 goals last season. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident.
No, not at all. It's tough to score goals in any league, but it just doesn't translate to the NHL game. It hasn't in Buffalo, anyways. And
it might. Who knows? They might put him on line next year and say, "Kid, this is your shot. If you don't, there's the door." I mean, because you look at, I don't want to open up old scabs and stuff, and I'm not comparing the players. I'm not comparing these guys and saying they're exactly the same player. But you look at a guy like Dan Paille in Buffalo's system. He just didn't fit. What he brought to the table was not. It didn't fit the system. You're putting a square peg in a round hole. He goes to Boston and he actually fits there pretty well, and he's been a successful player. I mean, he's not out there scoring 25 goals a season, but he helped them win a Stanley Cup. And if you ask me, that's pretty damn good. That might be what happens to Luke Adam. That might be what happens with Luke Adam, where you send him to a different team, and okay, we know we can use this guy because he brings to the table. Okay, and then he works out well. And then going back to an earlier conversation, you get the jackasses calling on WGR saying, well, Luke Adam could have scored 30 goals for the Sabres. Then you say, well, no, he couldn't have. Which is, like I said, a whole different conversation.
He's had his opportunities here. I say we've seen enough of him to know that he just can't fit into what we've tried to do because he played under Ruff. He played
Well, hey,
under
the
Nolan.
one thing, and I'm sorry to cut you off again, but I don't want you to get too ahead of yourself here. The one thing I think of is that we don't know what Ted Nolan's system is going to be. We have an idea, that's for sure, because we watched for many games last season. But what's not to say Ted Nolan comes in this offseason and says, okay, this is how we're going to play hockey. We're going to do this, this, and that, and things change. Who knows? Again, this is the fun part of going through this crap, is that everything, the product on the ice is going to be terrible. I promise. I promise you that. It will suck next year to watch hockey. But you have to find a silver lining in this season. And whether it's watching the kids, whether it's saying, hey, we're bad, we'll get Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel. Or, hey, this guy from Rochester wasn't doing so good last year, but something about this year, he's just doing better and he's developing, and that's fun to watch. That's the type of stuff I tell people to look out for in the next couple of years in the Buffalo Sabres, because if you're coming in the next season saying, hey, man, Buffalo Sabres are going to win the Stanley Cup, I'm probably going to hit you. That's just me being a generous, nice, caring Buffalo Sabres hockey fan. I'll hit you.
I mean, you could run over him with your car.
No. I could drive my car into a tree like Marcel Darius did. We'll drag race. No, I don't even know, man.
I had a story up about that incident.
Okay.
I had to take it down off the website. They say he left a Mongolian restaurant and was drag racing Jerry Hughes and, hit that, and he left the scene. I think that dude, again, he left the Mongolian restaurant. I think that dude shit himself something fierce and had to leave to change his shorts, and he didn't want to get caught with a
hey, I'll tell you what, and
cut off.
I don't want to sound insensitive by saying I'm going to crash my car into a tree. I'm just trying to make light of a situation over here. Buffalo sports are crazy because the Bills suck, the Sabres suck, and our lives revolve around the Bills and the Sabres.
They do.
So, unfortunately for now, things are going to be bad, like I said. And I'm going to wrap this up here because apparently, Frank, we've talked for over an hour, and I didn't even realize it. You've been a very fun guest. Appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime.
My wife is just about 9 months pregnant. She's due on Wednesday.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. I was not sure if I was going to make it tonight because we're not sure when this little guy, he doesn't have a name yet. It's a guy, and I've said often on my old time hockey show that this could be the Sabres Jesus.
Zemgus.
I hate to anoint the kid like that.
Zemgus. Name is Zemgus.
Is he
Be
Sabres
the first.
Jesus?
What's up?
Is he the Sabres Jesus, Zemgus?
Could be. Zemgus. Right there. By the way, I do have to say one thing I never mentioned to you. I find it, and maybe it's just because I don't get out much. I don't talk with many people. I think it's crazy that you and I are doing the same thing, and we almost have the same exact last name. That's kind of funny.
I know, that is hilarious.
Anyways,
you got an E on the end of it. How often do you get that? Is there an E on the end of it or no?
When I was a kid, it was always WOLF, and I was so pissed.
Really?
I was one mad 8-year-old,
And for me, it was the other way. I'm like, dude, I'm like the animal.
My mom always says the animal with the E, and I just say, if you get it wrong, I'm gonna flip you off. Or the worst part when I was a kid was people call me Wolfie, and I used to hate it. Now I just say whatever, just go with it.
Yeah, I was always Wolfie as a kid. My brother was. This never made sense. My older brother, he was a much better athlete than I ever attempted to be, but they called him Woodsy. I don't understand why they called him Woodsy. His last name is Wolf. They called him Woodsy.
Maybe it was a different story. Maybe it was a story, but
yeah,
hey.
He did shit himself in the woods one time.
That's probably it then.
But only I knew
that. Well, hey, early congratulations to you and your wife on the baby. Hope for healthy baby. Hope healthy baby Zemgus Jesus. That's what I'm going to call it. Zemgus Jesus Wolf. That's the name. You heard it here first on a podcast. Don't tell your wife because she might get mad.
She just wants the thing out.
Oh, you know what? My sister-in-law just had a baby a few weeks ago, and the look on her face was when she's like, the baby's here, he's healthy. She had a smile that could light up a room.
Good.
Because after I couldn't do it. That's just me. I could not do it. But that's coming from a 22-year-old. So
Yeah, one of these days.
Exactly. One of these days, I'll have my own little baby's Jesus, and we can all
Sabre Jesus.
Exactly.
Red Sox Jesus. We don't need a Red Sox Jesus. We got 2 World
No.
Series champions.
3 in 10 years. Okay. Let's be happy about that. But
yes.
Anyways, my guest, as I mentioned about an hour ago, Frank Wolf from the 300 level. Check out the website fromthe300level.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Wolf without the E at Wolf3328. Just like we're going to have crazy draft coverage, I know, I'm not even sure. I know we'll have you on sometime soon. Thanks again, man, for joining us. And anything else you want to add before we end this podcast?
No, just everyone enjoy the summer, drink responsibly, no texting and driving, and get out there and enjoy. Come to downtown Buffalo. If you haven't been to downtown Buffalo in the last 6 to 8 months or longer, you will not believe the changes that they've made down there and the changes that they continue to make. It's just fabulous. Come on down and enjoy downtown Buffalo, but don't eat at TGI Fridays. Eat at one of the local places.
Support your local businesses and bars, man. Well, hey, I haven't been to Buffalo. Exactly, and spay and neuter all your pets. Okay, I haven't been to Buffalo since the last game of the season, and that was only a few months ago, and it's changed drastically since I've been there. So if you haven't been there 6 to 8 months, it might look like a different city. I mean, I've seen some photos get posted up on the Twitter and the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and I'm like, wow, this place has changed. Now I plan on going there soon because I swear, this is it, because you and I, apparently we can just talk for days, and that's not a problem. But for the listeners, they may have already left. If they did, shame on you. You missed a great conversation. I will be headed down to the First Niagara Center approximately 1 week after the last game of the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, why, you may ask, I will gladly tell you. 48 hours after the closing game of the Stanley Cup Finals, the buyout period begins, and the Buffalo Sabres are expected to buy out Ville Leino. Now, why will I go to Buffalo? Because I must go to the team store and buy a Ville Leino Buffalo Sabres 3rd jersey in my size so I can wear it around proudly. Is there something wrong with me? Most likely, but hey, guess what? I'm just a Buffalo sports fan.
That's why we love guys like you, Ryan.
Because I could go crazy at any point in time because my hockey team is terrible.
Exactly.
I appreciate it, man. Well, like I said, thanks for joining us. Keep us posted on the baby. Wish you best of luck, and we'll talk soon.
Got it, brother. Thanks again for having us.
No problem, man.